Killer Couples Part 1. This is Bonnie and Clyde. You asked for it. Everyone knows about the very much in love and good-looking outlaws who were killed outside of Giggling, Louisiana on May 23, 1934. Trapped in their car as police unloaded 150 rounds, it ended a 21-month-long crime spree of robbing gas stations, restaurants, and local banks. But did you know that Bonnie and Clyde were actually serial killers? Yep. Even though they kept their heists pretty small, they were brutal and had a tendency to kill anyone who got in their way, mainly prison guards and police officers. Their murders were mainly done out of necessity and only when Clyde was cornered. He was more likely to kidnap a cop, hold him for a while, and then release him further down the line with money to head home. Towards the end, though, the second that he saw a police officer, they would shoot because they weren't sure whether there were traps being set for them. The couple never married because Bonnie still had a husband in jail, but they remained very much in love until the very end.
These are the top 7 deadliest American serial killers of all time. Starting off at number 7, we have Earl Nelson, also known as the Gorilla Killer. The proven death toll of 22 and a presumptive death toll of 25. At number 6, Ronald Dominic of Louisiana claimed the lives of 23 gay men. At number 5, Juan Corona claimed the lives of 25 people and went on a killing spree with a machete. 4, John Wayne Gacy, also known as Pogo the Clown. He assaulted, tortured, and murdered 33 young men and boys. Number 3, Ted Bundy, charming, handsome, and evil at the core. He murdered 30 women and maybe even more. 2, Gary Ridgway, aka the Green River Killer. He confessed murdering 48 prostitutes and runaways. And number 1, Samuel Little, aka Mad Machine. Killed 50 people and presumably 93.
Yo, what's up? These are serial killers that were never caught, part 1. The redhead murderer, otherwise known as the Bible Belt Strangler. The redhead murders were a string of murders committed in the Bible Belt in the United States around the 1980s. The women, whom were never identified, that's why they look so freaking creepy, is because that's not their real faces, all had something in common. They all had red or reddish hair. And most of the girls, if not all of them, were dumped on the side of interstates in the United States, which led investigators to believe they were involved in some kind of hitchhiking or sex work. Now, needless to say, it was unsolved for the longest time, but they believe it's this guy. But even if it isn't, this man who's obsessed with killing redheads could be still on the loose, and if you have red hair, well, good luck to you.
Today's monster will actually be a serial killer by the name Xmen. For 1 year, the city of New Orleans lived in terror over a serial killer named the Xmen. By the time his killing spree was over, he had killed 6 people and injured another 6. He loved jazz music and wrote a letter saying that at 12:15 at night he would be roaming around New Orleans, and anyone that did not have jazz music playing out loud would meet his axe. That night, the whole city of New Orleans was blasting jazz music, and true to his word, nobody was hurt. Later that year, the Axeman struck 4 more times. The crazy part is, after that, he completely disappeared. With no suspects, no fingerprints, or even a description of the killer, the case has never been solved.
Serial Killers You've Never Heard Of, Part 5. This is Craig, the Iron Man Price, also known as the Warwick Slasher. Between 1987 and 1989, he committed 4 murders. At the young age of 13, he committed his first murder, stabbing a nearby neighbor 58 times. 2 years later, he brutally killed 3 more neighbors, which was a mother and her 2 young daughters, stabbing the mother 57 times, her 10-year-old daughter 63 times, and brutally crushing the skull of her 8-year-old daughter. The stabbings were so brutal that the handles of the knives actually broke off. In September 1989, he confessed to all his crimes. Showing no remorse, he actually mocked the victim's dying sounds. He was sent to a juvenile correctional facility. From that point on, he racked up many more charges. He was actually set to be released April 2020, but stabbed an inmate.
Would you believe me if I told you that this sweet-looking grandma killed 4 of her husbands, 2 of her own children, 2 grandchildren, her mother, her sister, and her mother-in-law? Nanny Doss was given the name Giggling Granny because every time she would tell the story on how she killed her 4 husbands and her family, she would start laughing uncontrollably. Her favorite way to kill her loved ones was to poison their food and drink, usually with rat poison. In 1954, she was finally caught by a doctor. The doctor suspected foul play and was able to convince her to do an autopsy on her husband. That's when he found high amounts of poison in the body. When asked why'd she kill her last husband, she said because he did not let her watch her favorite TV show.
Random serial killer facts I just think about sometimes. This is Richard Chase, the vampire of Sacramento, and if he came to your house to try and kill you and the doors were locked, he'd just leave. He said locked doors made him feel unwelcome. Killers in Your State, Part 43. It's Texas. And remember how I told you that California was the #1 state in serial killers? Texas is #2 with almost 700. Any 90s babies out there remember your parents telling you not to take candy from strangers? This guy is why. His name was Dean Corll, and he lured 28 kids and 2 teenage accomplices to his van with candy between 1970 and 1973. Nobody had any idea that he was the guy who was doing the crimes, and they just referred to them in the paper as the Houston murders because it happened just outside of Houston. The thing is, he almost got away with it until one of his accomplices, teenager Wayne Henley, turned on him and shot him, then called the police and admitted to what he did and what Corll did. After the media found out that he worked at a candy factory and how he lured children, they called him the Candy Man. Both David Brooks and Wayne Henley are in prison for helping Corll. They are serving life sentences.
The differences between male and female serial killers. Males typically kill for sexual gratification, whether that's psychological or physical, and their victim's identity matters less. They typically kill strangers. In contrast, 90% of female serial killers know their victims, and they tend to kill for practical or justifiable reasons, at least in their minds, with the most common motivation being financial gain.
This man is known as the real-life Pennywise. John Wayne Gacy was a clown that performed at parties in the 1940s. He would lure kids to his house to perform magic tricks where he would then murder them. He murdered over 33 children, and he's said to be the inspiration for It.
Why are women so attracted to serial killers? Ted Bundy, Richard Ramirez, Charles Manson. These men have a lot in common. High cheekbones, strong jawlines, and symmetrical faces, but most importantly, they have murdered a combined 58 people that we know of. The more surprising reality is that when these men were convicted of these crimes, they received countless fan mail from female admirers. They would actually send them nude photographs, love letters, and would completely thirst over a guy that would eat them for dinner. Now, some claim women desire these men because they're the ultimate bad boy, and the woman can nurture him back to good. They think, oh, he would never kill me, and then they turn into the next victim. Others, such as Joe Rogan and his podcast, believe that this comes from an evolutionary benefit to become close to killers, because back in the day, murder was pretty common. So of course a girl would want to be with a guy who could prevent that. But ultimately, the question remains.
Today we're talking about Richard Ramirez, aka the Night Stalker. Born in 1960 in El Paso, Texas, Richard Ramirez was a convicted serial killer and Satanist. Richard had a really sad, abusive, and lonely childhood. His dad was really abusive to him. Richard often slept in cemeteries to avoid his abusive father. It wasn't until he was around 12 that he started hanging out with his older cousin Mike. Richard was really negatively influenced by Mike. Mike was a Vietnam veteran and often told Richard a lot of gruesome stories. He also had Polaroids that he would often show him of him torturing and abusing Vietnamese women. Richard seemed to not be fazed, but actually enjoyed looking at the photos. He also witnessed Mike shoot his wife in the face with a gun. Richard went on to kill 14 people and torture many more.
Serial Killers You've Never Heard Of, Part 8. This is Adnan Kolak, also known as the Artvin Monster. He was a Turkish serial killer in the district of Artvin. Between 1992 and 1995, he killed 11 elderly women between the ages of 65 and 95 years old, and sexually assaulted 6 others in the same age bracket. He was captured in 1995 and his trial went on for more than 5 years. He was ultimately convicted and given 6 death sentences and 40 years in prison.
Let's talk about the Barbie and Ken killers. Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka met at a bar in Canada in 1987. They got married just 2 months later, and over the course of nearly 3 years, murdered at least 3 teenage girls. The first victim was Carla's little sister Tammy, who the couple drugged with animal tranquilizers, raped, and tortured to death. The second was 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffey, who the couple brutally tortured and sexually abused before strangling Leslie and cutting her body up into little pieces and placing them into concrete blocks. The third victim, Kristen French, was abducted in 1992 and her naked body was found just 4 days later by police. This eventually led to the couple's arrest and both of them to be charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder.
Carla was given a 12-year sentence, whereas Paul was given life in prison because Carla actually testified against him in court.
Carla has been out of jail for a few years and is now married to her attorney's brother and has 3 children.
We are working with the last letter of the bloody alphabet today, which is letter Z with the Zodiac Killer. To this day, the Zodiac Killer has never been found, and due to this, I decided to color him in grayscale. On August 1st, 1969, the San Francisco Examiner, the Chronicle, and the Vallejo Times Herald each received an identical handwritten letter in an envelope without a return address. The letter read, "Dear Editor, I am the killer of the 2 teenagers last Christmas at Lake Herman." The letter contained details of the Zodiac Killer's murder that only the killer could have known. The writer then went on to threaten further attacks if the letter wasn't printed on the front page of newspapers. After this, multiple letters were sent out, and the letters also contained one part of a 3-part cipher that he claimed contained his identity. The FBI and Bay Area police worked really hard to catch the killer. However, this didn't happen. What ended up happening was another letter got sent in. Part 2 coming next. The next letter that they received read, "Dear Editor, this is the Zodiac speaking," and within the letter, it described the murders in detail and taunted the police for not having been able to crack the code and catch him. A few days passed, and the cipher was finally cracked. It read, "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all." In 1969, the 4th known victim of the Zodiac Killer was a taxi driver named Paul Stine. Just 3 days after the murder, the San Francisco Chronicle received a letter claiming the crime. The letter went into detail of Stine's murder and was accompanied by a bloody scrap of his shirt, and at the end, the killer mused that he would next shoot out the tire of a school bus and pick off the kids as they come bouncing out. The Zodiac Killer continued to send letters with more ciphers and mocking the police to not be able to catch him. That was up until 1974 when the letters stopped. Part 3 coming next. Although the Zodiac Killer's letters stopped, the investigation was not over. At least 4 separate attacks have been attributed to the Zodiac Killer, and at least 5 other murders have been linked to him. Although he was never caught, witnesses saw a man leaving the scene of Paul Stine's murder, and with their descriptions, police were able to create a composite sketch of the killer. The mystery surrounding the Zodiac case continues to fascinate the public. It has inspired multiple movies and TV shows. And that is the story of the Zodiac Killer. Also wanted to let you guys know that my merch is on sale for 20% off right now, and it includes free shipping. Go ahead and click the link in my bio to check it out.